Okay.
Okay, we should be live.
All right.
Go ahead and introduce us, darling.
Hey guys, hope everyone's doing well tonight. Beauty and the Beast here. We have news about the beard. Hope everybody is feeling good. We are here with an amazing special guest tonight. This is Dr. Pete Koplos out of El Paso, Texas.
And let's introduce the beard because Dr. Koplos has some amazing news.
Yes.
So here's our new beard.
Yay!
So this is Ben formerly from R&B Reptiles, now from the Bearded Man podcast. We're glad to have you on board.
Yeah, I'm glad to be on board.
Okay, so let's hand it over to Dr. Koplos. He has exciting news. What you got going, sir?
Well, like 3 minutes ago, we had breeding going on, but now they're starting to move around and hole up for the afternoon, all the radiated tortoises. But I'll show you a few. I don't call them by their stud book numbers. Not all these have names, but a few do. So this guy right here was named, can you see the male?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. It's an old male that I've had for several years. Came from John Heidecker. And my staff named him Turt Reynolds. Yeah, that's from Veronica. She likes to name them. So that's Turt Reynolds. And he's quite a pretty aggressive breeder. Then this guy over here is also named by Veronica, Star-Lord. And she named him that because he's a stud and likes to breed all the females. And I guess that has something to do with Guardians of the Universe or something movie, right?
Guardians of the Galaxy, yes.
So he's kind of aggressive and doesn't like you in his yard. And people think that he's coming to be friendly, but really what he's coming to do is combat you. And he'll come over a lot of the time and push on you. But he also likes to have a shell scratched, and he'll do the dance for you a lot of the time. See if I can get him to do it. Can you see that?
Oh, that's cute.
Yes.
He'll do the rain dance. And right now he's not going to cooperate, of course, but he's a very nice male. I've got a lot of babies out of him and a few others. This gal right here was just being bred. And as I was showing you guys earlier, the way you can tell is the males, when they mount, scuff up the shell. And you see right here how she's, can you see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. You see how she's got these scuff marks, and that's from breeding. And as they get older and older, yeah, this old female here, it was real popular with the males, and she was pyramided from an early age. I've had her for several years now, but you can see how the shell becomes polished from the breeding.
Wow.
And I thought he might come over, and we may still get some breeding activity here in a minute. Star-Lord's looking around. But it's been a good season. I've got lots of eggs in the incubator, 10 hatchlings so far.
Oh, wow.
Which is, it doesn't seem like a lot, but for radiateds, hatching rates can be kind of tough sometimes. The longer they're going, I think that it tends to get better. And I learned a few tricks from Tom Motlow, who is an excellent breeder of radiated tortoises. And one of them is to separate the males during the heat of the summer. They, I don't know if it's, really the heat or just the separation or, but it's possible that the sperm count gets, affected by the high heat, and we get super hot out here. So from about June till August, I'll take the males away and then reintroduce them in the fall. And it seems to have increased my fertility.
So are they still outdoors then in the summertime, or do they go inside indoors somewhere?
Lately, we've just started leaving them out 24/7. They were going, as long as it's above 50 to 55 at night, out. They do fine. They're not sensitive. You wouldn't do that. I really don't like doing that with, say, a Sri Lankan star. They're much more sensitive to the cold, and so I prefer those to be up, above 60 at night before they stay outside. And otherwise, you end up with respiratory infections. These guys are much more tolerant. They don't seem to miss a beat. It's relatively cold.
So what species of tortoises are you working with right now?
I've got Sri Lankan stars. I've got the radiata, of course. I've got a big pair of adult Aldabras that were many years ago that have been breeding for probably 8 years. And seems like these males need to be really big and really old to be fertile. My male is probably 30 years old, and he's easily 400 pounds. And been mounting the female for at least 7 years, and nothing. So, I think that it's. I'll be happy if I get eggs before I die. I've also got some galops that were graciously gifted to me by John, a longtime friend, and also one that I bought through a gentleman here in Texas that has a CBW. So I've got some young galops that, maybe in 20 years I'll get some babies. I've got recently acquired some Indotestudo forsteni, which is a critically endangered species, and I've been acclimating those. I've had them for 8 months now, maybe, and seem to be coming around. They take a long time to adjust. Not an easy species. And I've got, there's a bunch of Russian tortoises and things out here that I've had for many years that breed, and we pick babies up here and there. I don't get a lot of babies, but I just have got to the point where I let them stay in the ground. Hadn't had much luck with fertility, and I don't know why, but they're big adults, but I don't get a lot of babies. So kind of let them do their own thing. I've got, what else? Some eastern box turtles that I acquired several years ago from a gentleman in South Carolina, where they were, I don't know if they're legal anymore, but for up until at least a few years ago, it was legal to collect them still. And so I acquired my breeding stock that way. I think they probably shut it down completely now in South Carolina. But I've got some nice, really nice high-colored adults, and I may end up moving those inside. I don't know, because of the heat. Again, I get some breeding activity, but the biggest part of the problem, I think, is just finding eggs. My staff does a really good job of finding the radiata eggs, because they're out here all the time. But watching, seeing breeding nesting activity with box turtles isn't. It doesn't happen. So finding nests is a challenge. I really need to get a camera system out here to make that part a little bit more efficient.
Okay, you're cutting in and out. Can you bring the camera just a little bit closer to you?
Is that better?
Yes, that is better.
Yeah. So other stuff, I'm involved with the Kilonian Conservation Group, which is a group of, there's 3 veterinarians and I think 3 other breeders, and we all have a little bit different interests. A lot of us do radiateds. I've got my Beretti, my Kuara Beretti with Evan Rosenoff, and we got 2 gravid females right now, so that's pretty exciting. Not a species that's bred very often, and so that's a big accomplishment. Evan's done a great job with them. I sent them to him because he was in North Carolina, and I felt like the climate was better. He could manage them better. And then he moved to Florida, and that's even better. So looks like it was a good choice.
Awesome. What species is that? Kuara, what was that? I didn't catch that last part.
Well, I think they're now classified as Kuara Boreti, but they may be, depending on who you ask, Kuara galbinifrons Boreti. There's a galbinifrons. There's galbinifrons Boreti, and galbinifrons pictorata, I think, or they may be classifying those as just pictorata now. So the taxonomy is frustrating because I've learned this stuff, and then 6 months later somebody will change the name.
Yes, everybody wants to make their mark, and they want to do it by changing the names.
Yeah, well, you got to respect the molecular genetics, I guess. That's been a game changer.
Yeah, it's changed a lot of things in the hobby and in the classification system.
Absolutely.
So you got this. Tell us more about the conservation network. So you said there's several vets that are working together. What is the ultimate goal of that group?
It's to promote captive breeding for one, and work on obviously conservation of these species. But one of the things that I think is frustrating for private breeders is a lot of times get kind of you're isolated to an extent, and the zoos do their own thing. And I guess we're trying to create a network of people, that's got legitimacy and, contribute to conservation in our own way. Because it's pretty clear in some cases that there's a disconnect, and I don't think that's any one person's fault, but the system tends to shut the private guys out. So
are you you're working with tortoises? You're working with box turtles? Are you working with any kind of water turtles? Is the Kuara? I'm not familiar.
They're kind of semi-aquatic, but they're more I've seen people set them up and keep them in a say a waterland tub with a lot of water, but I wouldn't really call them aquatic. I don't have a big interest. I wouldn't say I don't have a big interest. I haven't done a lot of aquatics. I've got some just plain old yellow mud turtles that I hatched several years ago. I had acquired some legally collected wild caught females that were all gravid, and I collected the eggs and hatched probably 30 of them and gave some away and kept a few. And I've got like 5 adults now that I raised up that I have at home, and they're neat animals, like tough as nails, and pretty amazing. You put them in a different environment, and for several years we had these just in aquariums and fed them year round. Well, I let them hibernate, but most of the time they were out and active. And then I set them up in a waterland tub with dirt, and they disappeared to the dirt for 6 months, 7 months. Yeah. I don't think in the wild these animals are active, but maybe about 2 or 3 months of the year.
Wow.
They go in the mud and they stay there, and it's incredible. It makes you gives you pause on how we manage some species. For example, I also do have an interest in Uromastyx. I keep giant sun gazers, and they're in the other side of the yard, and probably not out at this point, but I have them outdoors. And when you give them a natural enclosure, their behavior totally changes. Uromastyx, I've got some young Egyptians, and I've kept lots of species of Uromastyx, and you give them a hide box and all the basic cage requirements, and they're out, and you see them a lot. And then you turn around and put in some excavator sand, for example, and give them a couple caves, and once again disappear for 6 months and come out fat and happy. And even when the temperatures weren't low, I didn't try to hibernate them this year, but they went into their caves and dug down deep, and they were there for several months. And I got nervous and even dug one out, looked at them and they look great. Let them go. Let them alone. Now they're out. So I guess the take-home point is, if you give a semi-naturalistic setup, the behavior can be dramatically different, and I think that changes how they're going to behave and breed ultimately.
Back to the yellow. Oh, I'm sorry, Ben. Go ahead.
I had a quick question because you're going down a road of like what you're sharing and what you're keeping.
Yeah.
What about these guys?
Which
These
guys?
are the Borneo earless monitors you had on your Facebook page.
Oh yeah, those are home. They, I've got more breeding activity. That particular breeding episode, I didn't get any eggs, or if I got eggs, they got eaten, which will happen with that species, according to a friend of mine that's bred them. And I got more, at least a couple lockups in the last 3-4 weeks. Yeah. So, and there's a female in that group that it's pretty fat. So we'll see.
Wish you a lot of luck. There's getting them to lay eggs is one thing, but getting those eggs to hatch, I hear, is like very tough.
Yeah, as well. I've had like 3 clutches, and every time these females have laid them in the water, and nothing. This year, I've got them set up in a waterland tub. The ones that I'm breeding, I've got 4 adults, two captive bred probable females here, and 2 adult females that I've had for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. Back when they were coming in, I got a group, and so I've had those all this time. And I don't have a male with that group. The male I have, I recently acquired, and I've got him with 3 females at home.
That's awesome. Those are super cool. And I've heard some success stories of breeding them and having nests set, like that are a plastic tub with damp cloth, so it's not in water, but it's real humid.
Right. What I did this year was I set up a waterland tub with basically a water, watertight water style, and got a dirt, deep dirt, and it's very moist with cork bark in there. Yeah. And they'll come out of the water and spend some time underneath the cork bark and then back in. And sometimes you'll find them dug down 6 inches into the mud. Well, I call it mud, but it's a wet soil. Yeah. So they seem to like that. I figure they'll, that should be an appropriate environment to lay in. We'll see.
Yeah. I have friends that talk about nesting and how people don't usually have nests set up well, or a place for animals, especially lizards, to nest, to be able to lay eggs. And that changes your world, like when you set up a real nest.
Yeah, and sometimes you set up what you think they're going to want, and they pick something else that seems pretty yeah, they're it's hard to outsmart lizards sometimes.
Yeah.
Sorry for just looking around. I'm trying to tell our son to get offline because I think he's got some video games or something. That's why we're having internet problems.
I didn't notice anything.
Good.
You see, the other problem I have, here's the vermin problem in this yard. The pigeons know that the tortoises get fed.
Yeah.
And they come down and steal tortoise food. Doesn't seem to be I'm not too worried about anything with that as far as disease goes, but it's kind of an aggravation to me.
Yeah, we have dogs that help with that. They just keep chasing the birds away because.
Yeah, we got lots of dogs here, but we don't leave anything out here unattended, obviously, because it's the veterinary hospital. It's pretty secure, but you never know. I got another species I'll show you here.
Awesome.
These are see if I can dig one up because they're they live down in the mud, in the dirt. They're here we go. This is Kuara flavomarginata evelinae. They're a island species, and they're just came out of hibernation maybe the last 3 weeks, and real personable animals that come looking for you, and will come eat right out of my hands.
Wow.
But I've only had eggs on a couple of occasions. Another one I'm considering maybe moving them. Maybe a little bit too hot here. They don't mind the cold. Beautiful animal. You see the yellow markings.
Yeah.
And just seem to be super hardy. They stay out, out in these pens year round.
That's awesome. They're a beautiful species. So how big is your reptile room at home?
I've got a room. I've got actually 2 greenhouses.
Oh.
And my Aldabras stay in the greenhouse at night when it's cold. I put them in. They'll come out year round just about. There's maybe 2 weeks of the year that if you during the winter time when the temperatures are no good, that I'll just lock them in the greenhouse. But mostly, if it gets up into even the 40s with the Aldabras, it is sunny. They're so big that they retain, they're like a walking thermal, basically a big greenhouse walking. They absorb the heat fast into that black shell, and they stay warm. So they'll go out. I've even had them go out when it snowed, and they'll go out, look around, and then turn right back around and go back in the greenhouse. They figured out it's a little bit too cold, but they figure out real quick where the warm area is. So yeah, I got a second greenhouse that just went in that I'm going to be using for some of the Aldabras and some of the tortoises from the conservation group.
That's awesome.
Plus, so I renovated the house actually, and the back of my house, like a lot of, at the time I didn't. Let's just say that the renovation project wasn't super planned, and I didn't have at the time I really didn't know if I was going to bring reptiles home, and I sold my clinic. And long story short, the back room that was going to be more of a plant, a plant room and a hot tub room turned into the reptile room. So that's where I have my cataphractus and the Forsteni and the Earless, and a few snakes, not a lot.
What kind of snakes are you keeping?
I've got a few clobs and
nice.
A few alterna, some locality hognose, and a pair of pyros that I thought were pretty nice. But snakes I really was into snakes for many years, and then just kind of fell in love with the tortoises, and the rest is history.
So the alterna, did you collect them yourself?
No, I got them from a local guy. I got a pair of Wacos, and Waco alterna, which are one of the harder localities to find. No, I've been out collecting, and I've collected one alterna in my entire life, and it was a male from the Apache Mountains in West Texas, which is an unheard of locality. I think there's been one historically collected many years ago, but that's about it. It's just a really small area, and a long way from just about anywhere, and not a lot of cuts to hunt. And we were out there actually looking for Trans-Pecos rat snakes, and maybe a lepidus are out there. This is actually the Waco Mountains are the furthermost range of lepidus, and then when you hit El Paso, which is 20-30 miles to the west, they become clobs.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting, the geography of that, because it's not a big distance, but for a snake that wants rocks, there's enough distance between the rocks that they evolved, and they're different species.
That's really cool. You cut out when you said the mountain range that you collected that Alterna. Where was it?
Did you say Aztec?
Apache Mountains.
Oh, Apache Mountain.
Yeah,
What's that near?
kind of near Van Horn.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but like I said, it's not really close to anywhere, and there's not a lot there. There's maybe 3 nice cuts. There's not. It's a long way to go for most people. For us, it isn't so bad, but still a couple hours to get there, and not a lot there. There's a nice canyon that you can hike down into that I haven't seen any fences or anything that looks like you're trespassing, but to go at your own risk.
So I looked at your Facebook page. I don't know much about you. Oh, I'm sorry, Ben. Go ahead.
No, I don't. I'm new here. I'm just trying to hang out. I don't know what to do with my hand. I did have questions. So if people wanted to start getting into tortoises, especially kind of larger tortoises, what would you suggest a good species to start with? And, how would someone get into it?
Well, if you're serious about breeding stuff, I personally think that you want to pick species, if at all possible, that are going to be adapted to your climate. Bert Langerwerf was just a legendary herpetoculturist, and I remember talking to Bert before he passed many years ago, and his whole philosophy, oh, look here, getting some activity.
Oh, yeah.
He's trying to turn her around. But basically, I would advise you to look at your climate and pick a species that you can manage outdoors year round. Tortoises do generally way better outside for lots of reasons. And so, I guess if I was up north or a little bit further up, I might concentrate on some testudo species, marginata, that can do well, even in really cold climates, and that way you can manage them outdoors year round. If you're further south, then that opens up a lot more possibilities. Leopard tortoises, I think, are a great species. I like a little bit larger species too. A lot of folks are attracted to them, so get captive bred leopards. If you can find the quote unquote pardalis, I think they're all considered Babcocki now, but that's a species, and hopefully someday we'll get a source of the true Somalians that get gigantic. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but they easily get big, or as big or bigger than a sulcata. You'll see pictures of them. They're a good 200-pound animal.
Wow.
And so they're impressive. And I think that'd be a great species to work with in the southern part of the U.S., a little bit drier maybe. I love star tortoises. If you can get babies and raise them up, I think a lot of it's going to also depend on what your budget is.
Mm-hmm.
I have a long-term plan. A friend of mine said he really wanted a tortoise, and I was like, well, I can't really keep tortoises. I mean, I could, but I just wasn't really wanting to at the moment. So I bought him a sulcata. And so I figure in 10, 15 years,
you'll get a huge sulcata.
Yeah.
Good plan.
They, they're really cool species, I think, and I kept them for many years. Sadly, a lot, maybe too many being bred, and too many people getting them and not knowing what they're getting into. It's an animal that's going to be 100 easily, at least 100 pounds, and will dig through your walls, and will dig from your backyard under your house to your front yard, and it can be. I actually had a sulcata dig a burrow once, and I had my old 14-year-old dog fell down in the burrow. I had to dig him out.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he was. I was in the house, and I could hear Jack barking like he was in the way in the distance. And I'm like, where is that dog at? And I go out there and I still hear him barking, nowhere to be seen. And he's down, fortunately it's cool down there. This was in the summer. And he was a good 12 feet down, at an angle, not 12 feet underground, but, probably 3 feet underground, 12 feet from the entrance of the burrow to where he was. And I had to dig him out. And they're not, they're an impressive species, what they can do. No doubt about it.
It's an adventure.
Yeah. But they're personable. I think they're really cool. And I don't, in some ways, I think there's probably more in the U.S. in captivity than maybe even in the wild. Who knows? I don't know what the statistics are, so don't quote me on that. But I know that they're heavily threatened in the wild. And so, I on the other hand, maybe it's a good thing to have too many, quote unquote, as long as they're not being abused.
Right.
So you knew Bert Langerwerf. Did you ever get to meet him?
But I called and talked to him, and he was gracious enough to time talking to me. I think anybody that ever talked to Bert would, he got to talk to. He tell you some wealth of information. In fact, he's where I got the idea to do the giant sun gator. And he told me in his accent, you see if you can get a hold of those and set them up. They're perfect for Texas. So he was quite a character.
Yeah, I'd hope to have met him. I bought some Physiognathus leisure from him 2007 or so.
Yeah.
And he passed away, or it was right around the time he passed away, so I never got to meet him. Always wanted to. He had, I read all his articles in Reptiles and Reptile and Amphibian and Vivarium, and he had a wealth of knowledge.
Oh yeah,
it was amazing.
No doubt about it. It was a big loss.
So, are you from El Paso, or did you move there?
No, I grew up in Houston, Texas, and came here in '97 to run an emergency hospital, a veterinary emergency hospital. Ended up staying. But no, I grew up in Southwest Houston, right next to a tributary to Sims Bayou, and Sims Bayou is a natural, we call them bayous down there, but it's a stream, creek, or whatever you want to call it, that drained the prairie. And when they built Houston, they channeled off of that in certain areas. They would dig channels and make drainage ditches. And so the drainage ditch was right next to the house. And so my earliest memories were knee deep in the mud, collecting anything I could get my hands on, crawfish. And, there were some big, actually there were alligator snappers in that thing. I remember seeing one. Unfortunately, somebody had killed it. But there were alligator snappers in that area at that time. And mud turtles and soft shells, and of course red ears. So it was emblazoned on my psyche from a very early age when I saw those animals in the water, and that was it.
What was the process from going out there and catching all those animals to going to school to become a veterinarian? When did you decide you were going to do that?
Well, really, probably I grew up around racing pigeons, actually. And my father was a pigeon fan, and we raised racing pigeons. And it's an interesting hobby, kind of like long distance racehorses in the sky.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a fascinating hobby. And so I noticed that there weren't really many veterinarians that would work on birds, and I decided I wanted to be an avian veterinarian. And so, and my father influenced me subtly over the years from the time I was about 12. And he'd ask me every, 6 months or a year, "You're going to be a vet, Pete?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna." And it was enough. Kept me on the path, and ended up going to vet school. And around that time, I started working for a local veterinarian in Houston, Charlie Wilson, at King Boulevard Animal Hospital. And he told me, you really should go down to the emergency clinic and get some experience there. And I did, and it really, I liked it. And so during, vet school, I worked as a technician and during the summers, and long story short, ended up choosing emergency medicine. Ultimately, I worked 1 year in Beaumont, Texas, as a mixed animal exotics. Did a little bit of horse work, a little bit of cattle work. Around that time, the emu industry was exploding, so did quite a few emu cases, along with insurance exams and whatnot. It was an interesting time. The emus were worth about $16,000 a piece at that time, and I'm sure at this point you could probably get them for $100 a baby, if not cheaper. But did some interesting surgeries. It was an interesting time. Then got engaged and married and moved to Houston. Spent about 4 years in Houston, and almost bought a clinic there, and didn't happen. So I made a choice to come here, and worked out real well for me.
So what are some of the maladies that affect emus?
Like I said, it's been a lot of years, but foreign body ingestion was a problem with them. You would get, they eat everything in sight, and sometimes gravel didn't seem to bother them, but sometimes they'd overeat it and end up with a proventriculus just full of gravel and obstructed. Had one in particular that ate a galvanized piece of wire and got zinc toxicity from it. They also get a sort of a slip tendon disorder, a rotation of their tibiotarsus, where their tibiotarsus is kind of the shin bone in a bird, so below the knee. And what happens is due to protein and growth, they twist, and so they end up with their leg kind of splayed out to the side, kind of like this, if you could imagine. And so what we would do with that is go in and do what's called an osteotomy, and you cut the tibiotarsus, derotate it, put a pin in it, and birds that stand up and walk away. So it's kind of
my goodness.
Yeah, it's exotic is an adventure. You talk to guys that have done it for a career, and you become an expert at a couple things, and then and then you may not work on another species with any problem ever. And so you're a jack of all trades and a master of none in a lot of ways. Go ahead.
So have you ever worked with ostrich?
I have, yeah. Got chased by one. I was in vet school. He was all red-legged, and anybody who's been around ostriches knows that when their legs and their neck, everything turns red, they're in season. The male is real aggressive. Yeah, you gotta be careful around them. But yeah, years, but I did do a little bit of ostrich work.
What's the most endangered species that you've had the pleasure of working on, or displeasure, depending on what was wrong with it?
Most endangered species. Wow. I've done a lot of zoo work over the years. Well, a lot at times. And so I've worked on elephants and Indo-Chinese tigers, leopards, Amur leopards are very endangered. So a lot of those species are probably the most. As far as tortoises go, reptiles, I don't know, to be honest with you. Radiateds are pretty far up there. Spider tortoises. I had some climbing eye at one point that ended up trading away for radiata, and I kind of regret that, to be honest with you. I should have kept the climbing eye, but can't keep everything.
True.
Remember that.
It's a disease, and you have to manage the disease.
Yes, that's the truth.
You really do. I've gotten a lot better at it, and what I learned is I got to have people help me. Art just came out right now feeding some of the box turtles, and if I didn't have people doing that kind of work, I wouldn't have nearly as much. I can't keep up with the grunt work, and so having folks that are dedicated to it and they just love to take care of the animals. Yeah, Art's giving me worms to take home. I've got to have keep one, so that's my project tonight. I got to take worms home. We go with your earthworms.
Are you culturing your own, or are you just buying them?
I buy the earthworms. I've got a culture of dubia at home that I feed to the cataphractus, and those things go crazy if you set them up right. You know, it's watering them properly and having some heat, and they explode. And I've got some mealworms, just some regular mealworms that I culture, feed the baby lizards, and yeah. So, but not that's enough. I don't have time or energy to do everything. That's for sure. But the dubia, every once in a while, I get a wild idea and say, wow, you know, if I set up, 30 tubs, I might be able to raise dubia commercially. Whee!
You easily can.
They are extremely fecund. There's no doubt. It's impressive.
Yeah.
And they're an excellent food item. You know, anything that you can get to eat them, it's great. The only problem I've seen with them is they hunker down and hide. And if you throw them in a cage and they don't get eaten, then you'll find them, 3 weeks later under a rock and never got eaten. They're survivors.
For sure.
Here when all the rest of us are gone, I'm sure of that.
They've got a little more brains than a cricket, I guess, because crickets they'll jump on top of their prey Adam's head.
Yeah, and
so,
crickets are weak.
Yeah.
I did learn a trick with watering crickets though from Howard Fluker, who I have consulted with. I went down and helped him in El Salvador with some projects he's working on, and he showed me one thing. You notice if you buy a cricket water, they have a sponge in them, right? They're like a little fountain, right, like a chicken water, right? Mm-hmm. And they sell them typically with a sponge. He said, "Oh no, throw that away. That they get bacterial growth and they'll kill your crickets." You put gravel in it, so you get you some aquarium gravel and fill that tray with, basically you put the cap on, turn it over, and then fill the tray with gravel. Keeps your crickets from drowning, and they do a lot better.
We'll have to try that.
Yeah.
We've been using the gel,
the water crystals.
Yeah.
I don't like giving people money when I don't have to. It's just having to buy something. But yeah, that's a good technique. I mean, it works, no doubt.
Yeah. So if I can, curve tail here a little bit.
Yeah.
So you talked about the sun gazers, right? And I'm a fan. Obviously, I feel like a lot of people would be. And so you have cataphractus, not the smog giganticus?
I've got cataphractus and smog giganticus.
Oh, that's
giganteus.
So cool.
Yeah. I've got 11 adult smog. They're in a. I'll show you the pens from here.
Yes.
You can see them over the fence. You see that?
I do. So okay. I'll say there's not a lot of those in the United States.
Say it again.
I said there's not a lot of those in the United States.
They're here and there. The most people have one or two, and they're notoriously hard to breed. I don't think Bert may have bred some, and I've heard of one other guy that said he had bred some at one point, but I hope they've been outside now year round for about 2 years. I had them for 7 years, and I kept them indoors, and I didn't really. And finally decided, if I'm going to breed these things, it's probably outside, and I'm going to have to give up some control. When you put lizards outside and they dig their own burrows, you lose control, and you don't always know if somebody's not doing well. It's a whole different ball game, and it sounds like a great idea but you kind of trade one set of problems for another in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And so it made me nervous. I put one out for the first year, and he did great. And then I put the whole group out last summer, and made it through this winter with no problems. Although I'm still counting, I've seen like 8 at once so far out of the 11, and they all seem to gather around one burrow. I just put up a camera that I can monitor from my phone. Not a little disappointed that we don't have enough bandwidth coming from the Wi-Fi here, and so it's grainy when you get up close. But I can see them and count at least. They will, when Art goes out there to feed, they'll come and run and eat right out of his hand in some cases.
Wow.
But then there's others that run right to the burrow.
Yeah.
So, it's presents some challenges, but I'm hoping that I'll wake up one day and see a baby come out of a burrow.
Oh.
Yeah, that would be cool. I haven't heard of anybody. I've heard of people claiming that they've bred them, but I haven't had any good evidence of it.
Birth, but there were people that thought that rabid, and who knows? I don't know. He had one born, and that's cool in and of itself.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I often wonder with those the nesting of how they're nested. I mean, they're an African species, and you figure that a lot of African species, they tend to have cycles where they deal with the rainy season. So if you're not giving them a rainy season or something like that, it possibly won't create a cycle. And then the nesting also is like a big, I don't know on that one, So I wonder if.
So at least we don't have to worry about nesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've thought about the rain. We do, water them during the summertime. I put out a sprinkler and just sprinkle the hell out of them. They appreciate. I haven't started that this year because I still get out to 40s on some nights, and I don't want to really get them too chilled with the water in the burrows.
Yeah. I've kicked around the idea because we talk about other species that are pretty typically hard to breed. Kicked around the idea of just Googling where they're at locally and making sure that the temperature or the rain is the same, or maybe even get a map and kind of plan it so that it meets our climate.
Absolutely. I did the same thing when I was really into Uromastyx and looked at, you can get it. There used to be weather centers where you could get all these different data points all over the world, and you can get all kinds of data. I think the problem is that you really don't know what that micro habitat, there's some detail on some animals. For instance, you can find data on Uromastyx that'll tell you what the burrow temperatures are, but you don't know what they are every day of the year. And then soil type matters. If there's a lot of rock and the thermal mass of the ground changes, that there's so many variables, and in a lot of ways you just kind of have to back into it and just experiment, trial and error. It sometimes, people, we laugh about it. One of my good friends breeds a lot of venomous, and he keeps his stuff mostly in cages with paper towels, and there's no naturalism to it at all, and he breeds the rarest stuff on the planet. I love looking at naturalistic techniques. It makes me feel better, feel like I provide a better environment, but at the same time, sometimes I don't. Sometimes we're not as smart as we want to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So back to your mud turtles. You said that you got some gravid females and you've raised up some babies to adults. Have you produced any eggs off of your captive born babies? And what
tried this year? They might breed. With the way I got them set up, they're at the age now where they probably will. I think they're 7 or 8, 9 years old, maybe. So they should be ready. They're cool turtles. If you've ever been around mud turtles, they come up and look at you and they're begging for food. And only problem I've had with them is they'll bite each other's toes off. When you keep them together, they start nipping at getting hungry, and they'll nip at toes, and you'll lose some hind toes. I don't know if that's a common problem with a lot of aquatics, but these guys sure seem to be prone to it.
Well, are you feeding any
oh my God, bulletproof. You can let I've had them in buckets when I was hibernating them, just in plastic buckets, and the water dry up. You go out there and go, ooh, the water dried up. Yeah, you don't care. Fill them up with water, and they're good to go. They're just they're the most bulletproof turtle I've ever seen. And if I was going to recommend a beginner's turtle, it would be those. Wow, impressive animal.
Are you feeding any vegetable matter to them, or what do you feed your
I
turtles?
feed them some pellets, different. I get different stuff. I'll get fish pellets. I'll get floating food pellets, and they love earthworms. Feed up earthworms. I've been telling myself I was going to find some feeder leeches, because I figured in the wild they probably eat leeches. And in fact, what really spurred me to that idea were the earless monitors, because if you've ever seen them attack an earthworm, they're probably not getting earthworms in the water. They probably are getting leeches. And so it kind of makes me wonder whether leeches might be a really appreciated food item.
Leeches are a bit of a pain to breed, though.
Yeah, I'd be buying bait leeches. They do sell them, but they're seasonal. You got to wait until they start collecting them for bait, and that makes me a little bit nervous about what they might be contaminated with. And so I'm like,
sure.
It strikes me as a good idea, but it gives me a little bit of pause.
There are people that breed leeches. We got a captive born leech, but they take a while to grow, and it was odd. You have to feed them. Huh?
They're called turdies.
Turdies.
Captive-bred leech. Now tell me about your captive-bred leech. Was it like a giant species? I've seen some crazy cool leeches.
No, it was little, and it was young, and so you have to feed them, which is an interesting process,
Have you ever seen the video of the leech up somebody's nose?
No.
That's quite a sight.
Yeah, I bet it would be.
Yeah.
I want to know how to take care of not any leech, a captive born leech. Tell us about it, Ben.
Baby.
The holy grail of leeches.
No, it's just, there's people that breed them for, I don't know, pets or various reasons. We saw some guy at a reptile show selling them, and we said, well, you got to buy one of those. That seems ridiculous. And he's like, you gotta take it out and feed it. And I forget the whole deal. But obviously, so Ryan, the other half of R&B Reptiles, Ryan was doing that. And you'd have to let it, suck on your hand for a little while.
Oh, wow.
To feed. And it's not bad, but it'll bleed because of it has an anticoagulant. So it's like, after it's done, you bleed for a while.
Man, when I was a kid, there was and I'm going to date myself, but it was an old movie then, okay? So don't give me a bunch of
right
now. Yeah. But The African Queen was a Humphrey Bogart movie, and there was a scene in it where they're wading through the mud in Africa. They come out and they got leeches all over them, and they're all panicked, and it was this big. And it freaked me out as a kid. The only other movie that freaked me out as bad was Willard, and I still don't like rats. Yeah, no, I can tolerate them, and but a wild rat is the only creature on the planet that really gives me the creeps.
Well, coming back around again, your clobber eye, are you breeding them?
Say it again.
Your clobber eye, are you breeding them?
No, I haven't. They were. I may end up breeding some, and I do have a cool locality of them. But I just like having them. They're beautiful. I have a speckled rattlesnake as well that I force fed for about 4 years, and so it's probably my proudest accomplishment was getting that thing to eat. And now it eats like a champ, even dead. And anybody that knows wild caught speckled rattlesnakes, they're hard to feed. So I'm as proud of that as anything, really. Just being able to keep it alive.
Oh, that's really neat. So I was on your Facebook page. It looks like you like to fish a little bit.
Yeah, I'm a fly fishing addict. That's one of my. I tend to become obsessive about my hobbies, and fly fishing. Yeah, it's a passion. I haven't done as much lately, but I do good trips. Recently, one in Bolivia that you probably saw. Caught 40-pound golden dorado on a fly, which was there was a lot of jealous guys on that trip. I caught the best one, and so
Wow.
it was fun. They're an incredible animal. They got teeth like a piranha. I mean, just amazing teeth. I wouldn't want to be bitten by one.
Have you ever fished up north, like Montana?
I go to Montana a couple times a year. I've got a cousin that has a cabin near East Rosebud Lake, and we go there and fish in the creek, East Rosebud Creek, and a little bit in the Stillwater River, which is a popular drainage. I used to go to Alaska quite a bit, and I haven't in a few years. Fished on a river called the Seatook, which is a world famous steelhead run. It's beautiful. It's a small river, crystal clear. Probably, at the smallest 10 yards across. And so really a beautiful setting to fly fishing. Have not caught steelhead yet, though. And so that's one of my goals, is to go and fish a steelhead run. I just needed to get on it. Actually, I have caught steelhead. I caught steelhead out of Port Angeles, Alaska, a couple of years ago, flying into a high mountain stream, and did catch a steelhead on a fly rod. But I want to go catch a lot of them. I don't want to just catch one. So that count. Silver salmon are fun on a fly rod. That day was 30. They were 10 to 14 pounds, and most of those released, of course. But we kept some for me. It's fun, and if you want to really have a ball and catch a lot of fish, I recommend a silver salmon run, because you get a lot of numbers and the fish pull. They run like a freight train.
Wow.
I think my favorite, though, is probably going for bonefish in the flats. I haven't done a ton of it, but it's probably the biggest thrill I've had on a fly rod, is catching one of those in the flats and having them peel off 100 yards of line and back, and just and then you pull it in, and it's 12 inches long and weighs 2 pounds. Yeah, it's crazy how strong they are, but they have to, they got to avoid the sharks, and they're built for it. An impressive creature, and you don't eat them; you just let them go.
I'm more of a worm and hook kind of guy. So I'm from Montana, so I've spent a lot of time fishing up there.
What part of Montana?
I was born in Miles City. I lived in Baker. I graduated from Park City, and my parents and grandparents live in Hamilton. So I've been all over Montana.
Well, I do a little hunting too, and I did go on not a lot, but I love to eat wild game, and I went on an elk hunt in up near Glacier in Bob Martin. Is that right?
Yeah.
And beautiful, just fantastic. Caught some really nice cutthroat up there too, up to 22. Beautiful fish.
Yeah, I love fishing that area. Have you caught grayling yet?
I have not. I haven't been anywhere that they were found. I would like to catch grayling, and I would also like to go up to some of these high mountain lakes and catch golden trout. It's kind of a running joke with my brother now. There's a lake called Sylvan Lake up in the Absaroka Beartooth Mountains, and near East Rosebud Lake, and it's it's a rigorous hike to get up there, and basically my brother's gotten too old. He won't do it. And I'm gonna have to carry him up there on a horseback if I'm gonna ever get there.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun being up there, but there's not a lot of snakes in that area. There's rubber boas. I know a few have been caught around there.
I've caught a gopher snake up near the Stillwater one year, right on in the Stillwater, basically trying to go in the river. And I caught, I guess, wandering garter snakes, I want to say, are up there.
Yeah.
Thamnovus vagabondus, I think. I don't know. But yeah, I was fascinated to hear about rubber boas because they live in this incredibly cool environment, and I guess that's probably why there's not a lot of them in captivity. You don't see a lot of people working with them. Probably have to keep them at room temperature, like a lot of the Chinese species that people work with.
Well, what I've been told is I've seen one rubber boa that was collected in Montana, and I didn't collect it. But a lot of people, there's some people that, not a lot, that know where to go to find them in California. Apparently, they range all the way over there.
Right.
So, but just they're a tough one to keep going. They just don't like to eat in captivity. They probably get too warm. That's what I would guess.
Yeah, that'd be my guess, and that you need to keep them. All those what are they? Mandarin rat snakes. People keep it cool, and they do digest at room temperature. But I'm just telling you what I've been told. My friend that raises that keeps Thea's vipers, they're kind of the same way. The things need to be cold, and he's had some for, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 years now, which is an accomplishment in and of itself. Those things just are notorious for dying in captivity. But he's actually got a copulation out of them several months ago, so maybe he'll get some eggs.
Awesome.
Oh, so they're an egg-laying viper.
Yeah, Azomyops, Thea, and Carina. Beautiful snakes. You look them up; they're black with orange rings, and the Carini have kind of a mottled orange head, and then the Theas have a more of a stripe, I think, on their head. They're not quite as impressive heads, but both snakes are just stunningly beautiful. Only thing I can think of that looks similar is a baby ring python, but the ring python has a much wider band than the Theas, than the Azomyops do.
Awesome.
So speaking of your hobbies, I know you're quite the horticulturist. So I want to talk about all your crazy vertical gardening that you're doing. But before that, I wanted to ask you about your greenhouses. Do you build them? Do you have a place? Because most of the stuff that you can order that's essentially prefab is complete junk. It's very expensive and it doesn't last more than a season. So I wanted to ask you about your greenhouses.
I bought both of these greenhouses. One of them came through the conservation group. But both of them came from a place called Greenhouse Megastore, I think. And there's a company called Conley's that manufactures them, and they're very nice. They're made out of roll form steel, and so basically they're a hoop. This one, the new one, I'll have to send you pictures on it. It's got kind of more of a gabled roof, but they're very sturdy. I've had one of them for a good 15 years, and the plastic's still good. It's dirtier and it's not as pretty as it was, and I've had to replace the door, but the greenhouses hold up, and they'll cost you about 10-12 grand for a 30-foot greenhouse by 16 to 18 foot wide. Then you're going to pay somebody to put it up, unless you're handy. And if you're handy, you can do it yourself. It's not that hard. It's just time consuming.
Right.
I have a natural gas heater and a swamp cooler in both of them. I use a Ranco dual stage controller, which is similar to, trying to think of what people use those on. I've seen them used on aquarium chillers, aquarium thermostats, for heaters and chillers. People that make beer use them as well. and they're a really nice, reliable thermostat. They allow you to set a temperature range. So I'll set the cooler to come on at say 85 degrees, and when it goes down to 80, it'll turn off. So instead of cycling so much, it gives you a range and doesn't put so much work, wear on the motor. And it'll do the same thing with the heater.
Very cool. So I'm dying to talk about your vertical gardening. How long have you been doing that? It's so awesome.
Like a year and a half, maybe. I renovated the house and built out a front portion. I had originally planned on being there, but since the tortoises were being so active, I thought you guys would appreciate the tortoise view better than the vertical garden. But I got interested in orchids and epiphytes, bromeliads, tillandsias, and after looking at it, to be honest with you, I'm really tempted. I'm thinking I'm going to close the room up, and I'm going to have to find some abronia or something to put in there, because it's a 20-foot wall with two big logs covered in epiphytes, and if that's not doesn't scream abronia, I don't know what does.
Abronias are cool.
The only thing I have to figure out is I've got the humidity down to where I've got the room on a big humidifier that keeps it about 75% humidity, which is about perfect for all these plants. And I've just got to figure out how to incorporate a basking area with UVB, because the lighting system that I have is ideal for plants, but it will not provide any UV for the lizards, and that's a problem, obviously. So there is a new product out that I think I'm going to try. I think Zoomed put it out. That's a UVB LED. And you may have seen it. I did a search recently, and I don't know what the output is and the distance or anything about it, so I can't say that it's going to work. But I would love to use something like that, because who likes replacing bulbs every 6 months?
Right.
The distance for those, I'm told, is pretty close.
Yeah,
like you have to be pretty close to them, and I don't know that the output is actually what it says it is.
Yeah, probably going to need some tweaking, or maybe use T5s.
Yeah.
Well, didn't Ryan McVeigh say that his have like a 6-foot range on them? Have you heard otherwise, Ben?
Yeah, so I was just going to point you to Ryan and say, hey, talk to him about what you're looking for, because Ryan McVeigh is the guy for lighting at the moment.
Okay, well, I appreciate that tip, because, it's going to be a challenge. I'm going to have to figure out a way to attract the lizards to bask, so they get close enough to the lamps, because, that's I think the wall is like maybe 6 feet high, 7 feet high from top to bottom, and the light's not gonna, the grow lights do fine. The plants are loving it, and but it won't be appropriate for lizards. So I don't know if I'll end up doing it or not. I do enjoy sitting in front of it and watching my plants grow, and I will sit there and watch. Are you going to grow?
Well, what is the name of Ryan McVeigh's company? I cannot think of it right now. Ben, do you know? He's going to look it up.
Yeah, it's on the tip of my brain. We'll get you all the links to it. But yeah, definitely people looking for newest, latest, and greatest lighting. Ryan McVeigh is the guy. We know it. we know it. Just can't think of it.
Well, I need a recommendation as well. I've never really gotten into using UV meters, but kind of like to start checking my Arcadia bulbs and see if they're still good, rather than throwing them away and changing.
Right.
So the new company that he's been doing, I guess it's been a little while now.
VivTech.
VivTech. Okay.
Yeah.
I can remember that.
I remembered his last company off the top of my head, but for some reason I couldn't remember the newer one. But I was, to be fair, getting out of the reptile business when he launched it. So
Very true. Yeah, that is true. So,
Well, you have the ability to sex tortoises, correct?
Yeah, I've done quite a bit. I started doing it maybe 10 years ago, and done hundreds. We've done, I don't know, 270 Bolson tortoises at the zoo in a project for the Turner Foundation, where they're introducing Bolson tortoises into a couple different ranches that are part of the historic range. Probably, maybe thousands of years ago, I don't know, but they did range up into New Mexico. So Ted Turner's ranch has semi-wild adults, and they are releasing babies. This is all, through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and state wildlife agencies, and obviously because it's regulated. But we sexed 270 plus young Bolsons, and where I got a lot of the experience. But I've done lots of radiata. I've done some Aldabras and Galapagos, Sri Lankan stars, Burmese stars, but mostly radiateds is what I do.
What's the process for sexing them?
So I anesthetize them with a ketamine and dexmedetomidine mixture. Sometimes add on a little bit of midazolam, and you don't have to breathe for them. They don't. They probably hold their breath most of the time, but they're out. You put them kind of head down at a 45-degree angle into a sort of a circular towel. I make a donut out of the towel, and basically tape their rear legs out, make an incision in front of their hind leg on the left-hand side, about 1/8 of an inch in diameter, and then we pop in with a pair of hemostats and run sterile saline into the coelomic cavity to help your vision. And you look up kind of near their hip. If you can imagine where the tortoise's hip would be, that's about where the gonad is. And it's variable. Every species is a little bit different. The bigger the tortoise, once they get up larger, it becomes challenging to get through the coelomic membrane, and we have to use a pair of endoscopic scissors to cut through that coelomic membrane to gain access and see the gonad. There is another way of doing it that I've tried, and most people don't do it, but you can go through the urinary bladder, and if you get right up close to the urinary bladder, you can see through the bladder wall because it's kind of thin. And in a fairly mature animal, you can see the follicles of an ovary that way, but it's not as clear, and it can be a challenge because of the anal scute morphology and just trying to get in at the right angle to the into the bladder. So it's tougher. I can sex a radiated tortoise if it goes fast in 2 or 3 minutes, and most of the time is spent closing getting the fluid out of the coelomic cavity and putting the stitches in. But literally, you go in 30 seconds, boom, there it is. And then there are other times where it's a little more difficult. You spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes looking around. But it seems to be a very safe procedure, a low complication rate. But it's surgery, and there's always some risk.
Wow, that's amazing. So, is it not? Are you not able to see the gonad through ultrasound because of the thickness of the shell, or?
In an adult you can, and you can do a CAT scan of an adult female of any tortoise that's reproductive, and usually you can see their follicles developing.
Oh,
I've done lots of CAT scans on tortoises, and you'll see just masses of follicles, very, very obvious. But most of these tortoises are 150, 200 grams, and there's not an ultrasound probe that's small enough to get into the prefemoral fossa to even ultrasound them. So it's a size issue. The other thing, age. If they're young, a lot of times you'll look in there And you can technically see the gonad. I can see the gonad on a 30-gram tortoise with a 1.9 millimeter scope, and we've done them down to 25 grams on Bolsons. But if they're not old enough, you'll look at the gonad and you won't be able to tell. You'll have to go, well, and there are some folks like, Stephen Divers would say, if you see an oviduct, then it's a female. But Dave Rostel, who's a biologist that has done thousands of sexings, will tell you that sometimes what you think is an oviduct is going to go away and it's going to turn out to be a male. So I don't know, but if I see an oviduct and I'm not sure, I'm going to call it a male. But what I like to see is, in a male, you'll see real smooth surface of the gonad and venation and no irregularities to the surface. And in a female, in a real young female, immature, you'll get kind of a rough, grainy type surface, which is the immature follicles. But what I really like to see is the refractile follicles. And when you see a refractile, kind of looks like tapioca. If you can imagine how tapioca looks, that's what the follicles look like on the surface of the gonad when they're immature. And you see that, and you know you got a female. When they get a little bigger, then they start looking like a cluster of grapes, and it's a no-brainer. You can literally in 3 seconds, you see it, and you know.
That's awesome. I have a question for you that's kind of out of the blue. Do you know anything about
I didn't do it.
Do you know anything about Heloderma texana?
Heloderma texana? No, I never heard of such a thing. There's a Heloderma in Texas, or is it extinct?
It's extinct, and they've only found one fragment in West Texas. And I would like to learn as much as can be known about it, but the information out there is very limited. So I was hoping maybe.
Never heard of it. You taught me something. I know that they have found them as far east as like Deming, New Mexico, which is only, I don't know. Deming's only maybe an hour and a half away from here. It's not far, and it's only maybe 30 or 45 minutes west of El Paso. It's north and west, but the Gilas aren't far from our area, but they're not here. But yeah, that would be fascinating. Maybe someday somebody will recreate the species with cloning.
Little Jurassic Park would be awesome.
I'm not against it. I think we should be creating all the dinosaurs we can. And if they eat people, then we're probably better off anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, here's another question. Since you're from Texas, did you ever know, what's his name? Joe Laszlo. Oh, did you ever get to meet him?
Heard the name, but I didn't. No. I'm only familiar with the name. I do know Gary Harwell, and if you guys may not know Gary Harwell, but he's a veterinarian that he actually bought out. You remember Louis Porras, Zoo Herp? Way back, he bought Louis's business, and I used to go over and he would bring in crazy stuff, and I did buy a pair of rhino vipers back when I was much younger, and I got married, and that was the end of the rhino vipers. But they were beautiful, and they were tree forest rhino vipers, and I loved them. I think one of the most colorful snakes on the planet.
They are beautiful. I heard that they don't live very long. I don't know if that's true or not.
I asking the wrong person. Yeah, when I had them for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, something like that. And he was like, oh, that's like a record at that time. That was back in the 80s.
Wow.
Actually the late 80s, early 90s. But I think like a lot of stuff, they come in heavily parasitized and traumatized by collecting, and there's not a lot of people producing any. And once you get captive raised animals, it's a different story. But the wild caught ones get pentastomids is one problem that you'll run into, and they'll get a pentastomid is kind of a weird parasite. It's not a worm, but it looks like a worm, and it's really I think it's more of like a crustacean almost, and it looks like a hellgrammite almost. It's this big a guy brought me one that was probably as long as my middle finger stretched out, that a rhino had actually aspirated up, had coughed it up. But you can imagine having a worm down in the air sacs and the lungs like that, the kind of damage that it does. And then if you kill it while it's there, good chance you're going to kill the snake. You know, that much dead, dying tissue in the lung is going to be a problem. I think the only good way of getting rid of them would be surgery, or minimally invasive surgery with a scope. Go in and pull them out. Probably have to go through the air sac and make an incision and go in and get them out that way if you knew they had them. So yeah, it's a shame, because so many animals that get collected and you don't know what they've been put through. And they've been probably put through a lot and holding, and by the time they get here, they're dead, even though it might take a few months for them to die.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So you work with lizards, turtles, a little bit with snakes. Do you have any? So you said you had a dog. Do you have any other animals?
Oh, I've got some cats at home. Every once in a while, I'll think something stupid and think, wow, it would be really cool to have a margay, but those are impossible to get, and I really don't need cats urinating in my house at this stage of my life, my personal life. But I would have them if I, didn't have a significant other that would complain. I think servals are awesome little creatures. And,
yes.
I wouldn't mind having a serval or a Savannah cat, maybe. But, that's we've all got a little bit of crazy in us, and I think that would be crazy. But yeah.
So YouTube's been real blown up. Everybody wants to know, how fast are racing pigeons?
Yeah, no,
racing
I
pigeons,
have to know about that.
When we raced them, the way the speeds were recorded. Okay, so the way it works is you get a distance for your loft. Okay, so because you can't have, although they do loft races where people will send pigeons from like 20 guys or 50 guys or 100 people will send a bird to one fancier, and he'll set up a loft and he'll train the birds, and the winner wins a money or whatever they're putting up, a car, who knows. In Belgium they win houses, a lot of money on it. But the way that the club races are generally done is that everybody has a loft, and they have the different race stations. So they'll go 100 miles, 200 miles, 300, out to 600 miles. And each release point, you get a survey down to the foot of your distance. Okay. So they know that my house is 630 miles, So when the bird comes home, it's clocked electronically, and the time they were released, the time that they got home. So you figure their average speed. The fastest average speed wins. So that, because everybody's distance is different, right? The speeds that we generally had were going to be in Houston, is where we raced them, and most of the races were north, and so they always had a headwind because the winds came out of the south and southeast. The birds would fly around 900 yards per minute in most cases, but if you got a north wind, you might get them up to 14 or even 1,600 yards per minute. So you're talking, 55, 60 miles an hour.
Really fast.
Do they have to wear helmets?
Well,
That's
there's
really
some dangers
fast.
for them. The birds will hit telephone wires and come home with broken legs or a broken keel. One of my story I told when I was being interviewed for vet school was of suturing up a racing pigeon that had come home, and her crop was open. She was eating, and the corn and everything was falling out of her crop. And so I went and got some purple thread and a needle, and I just sutured that bird up, and she lived. And that was my story that I wrote as an experience. And I don't know if they believed me or thought I was crazy. That was my first surgery ever. Fortunately, birds have a very high body temperature, and they don't tend to get infections as readily as other species. So that was in my favor. But they're very fast, and they want to come home. The way you race them they're either raised as young birds, which is you're flying them to a perch. You're training the bird. They all have a perch. You take them out and you train them on a 5, 10, 15, 20-mile tosses, 30-mile tosses, and they come home. And then after they get used to that, you fly them in races, and they're flying to a perch. The old birds are flown to eggs typically. So you get them down sitting on eggs, and you try to time it where they're 14, 15, 16 days old eggs when they're getting ready to hatch, and the adults want to come home. Then there's another system called Widowhood, where they fly just the males, and then there's double Widowhood, where they fly the males and the females, where they separate them. When the male comes home, he gets his hen, but you don't let him breathe. So he'll strut around and coo and court the female, and you take him away. And so he gets it in his head that every time I come home, she's waiting. It's a hard Widowhood cock that's coming home to a hen. That's the way the Belgians fly a lot of those, and a lot of the bird breeds were historically, from Belgium. A lot of the famous breeds, and they're all families. Everybody, I was obsessed with it as a kid. And, there's hundreds and hundreds of families of pigeons, and I don't know what the popular ones are in the U.S. now, but it's a big deal, and it's a lot of fun. If you get into it, it's quite a sight to see a bird come over the top of the hedges from 600 miles, land on the landing board, strut around and coo like he's home. This is my place, and then go in. They're quite a creature.
That is very interesting.
Sounds very time consuming. Sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, definitely.
Gotta clean it. There's a whole lot of art to it. You gotta feed. You've got to manage their molt so that the birds are not molting at a time when the race is happening. There's all kinds of stuff that goes with it. Fine details, for sure. Like anything else, the deeper you get into it, the more you realize you don't know. Yeah, and that's the way it is with reptiles and reptile medicine. The more you figure out, the more you realize we're just scratching the surface.
Wild.
That's neat. So when did you give up keeping pigeons?
I went to veterinary school, and my father still had pigeons, but I didn't have a place to keep them, and I got interested in, I also, actually what happened was I left out a whole phase, and it was African cichlids. I was an avid cichlid breeder. I got interested in African cichlids, and I worked at a aquarium shop and bred a lot of African cichlids, and so I was very passionate about fish for a lot of years, and reef aquariums. Haven't gotten back into reef aquariums in a few years, although I got a tank set up waiting to be plumbed and turned it into a reef, although it may end up being a Lake Tanganyika cichlid tank.
Awesome.
So you were breeding them. Can you keep? I know a guy up in Roswell, New Mexico, that had rainbow fish he was keeping outside in the greenhouse. Is there any fish that would be? I mean, would Tanganyika be real good in a greenhouse in El Paso? I mean, would they do well? Breed and all that?
They would do quite well with our water here. The well water the groundwater is very hard and alkaline, which is what the water is like there, and they do quite well here. In fact, one of the world famous authors and biologists, Ad Connings, lives in El Paso, and he's written more than one book on Lake Malawi cichlids. A very famous guy, real nice guy. I met him a couple times. I've been meaning to hit him up and go to Africa with him. He goes once a year for like a month and dives in the lake and to see the fish. That's been a lifelong dream, to see the Rift Lake cichlids in situ.
Wow. So that reminds me of a question I was wanting to kind of circle back to. you've talked about some of your travels abroad. Tell us, so you've been to Brazil, and
Yeah,
tell us.
I'm not that well traveled, but I've been to a couple places. Not like some folks, but yeah, I've been to El Salvador to visit Fluker Farms, which is an impressive place. Howard Fluker's done a hell of a job. He's got an incredible number of bearded dragons. It's just unbelievable to see. And I'm not really a big bearded dragon guy, but he's got some nice ones and some colors that he hasn't sold. He's just raising up. And in Bolivia. But I haven't really herped around the world like I would like to. I would love to go to Morocco and see Moroccan Uromastyx, and Mali, and see the Mali Uromastyx there. I'd love to go to every country that has Uromastyx just to see them.
That'd be awesome.
I think it would be a pretty amazing. I just like to see what they're, and see it year round, because it's always bothered me. These animals must not eat year round. They must eat during the rainy season and gorge, and then they go back down in the burrows and stay there, because there's just nothing during the heat of the summer in a lot of these places. There's nothing to eat. Then maybe some acacias, and I do know that the ornates and ocelotus eat the acacia tortoise bean as part of their diet. Acacia tortoise produces a kind of lentil-like seed, and I think that's where the idea of feeding them lentils came from.
Right.
They eat lentils. But then they'll eat flowers of the acacia bush as well. But man, there's, like in Mali, if you look at the articles back in Reptiles magazine when they wrote an article on Mali Uromastyx, I don't know if it was Randall Gray that wrote that. Somebody wrote an article many years ago, and it's yellow sand dune. There's nothing. And so it's always made me wonder, whether that species eats a little more insect matter in the wild than others, or it's just a seasonal thing. And I suspect maybe a little bit of both.
I didn't hear. Are you keeping any Uromastyx right now?
All I have is a couple of Egyptians. I bought some babies, and I've got two Egyptians that are probably 6 or 7 inches long now. I would show them to you, but they're holed up in a cage, and I rarely see them. They come out, and as soon as I walk by, they're back in their holes. Very wild. Once I gave them those naturalistic burrows, they decided they were wild. I guess that's good for them. And that's what happens. That's the thing that happens to lizards outside. I kept Uromastyx outside, and I thought this is going to be great. Well, it is great, and their colors are amazing if you can see them. But as soon as you walk up to the cage, they're gone. And just seeing if they're eating is difficult. You're going to have camera systems, because you can't get close. I mean, they are watching, and they're, I don't know if you've ever taken a monitor lizard outside that was dog tame.
Oh yeah.
Every
summer.
And look out. They turn into a tail slapping, biting, clawing wild creature compared to what they are when they're inside.
Right.
I'm sure not all of them are that way, but wow.
Probably.
It's highly likely that they're going to turn into a wild animal with sunlight. And so it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, we got a water monitor. He's about 5 foot long now, and he's a sweetheart till you take him outside. Now, if we go out there, you get within 5 foot of the cage, and he's gone. He's in his hole.
Yeah,
and whipping and.
Yep.
Oh yeah. No, and that's great. That's what they should.
Yeah.
That's how they should behave. They shouldn't be dog tame. I know that might anger some folks, but if you put them outside and they turn wild, that tells you something.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. I may be wrong. I've been wrong before. I'm reminded of it almost every day when I am at work. The staff won't let me forget. But I tell you what, don't go up against me guessing the weight of a dog, because I can get within about 5% most of the time. And I'm going to win the lunch.
Well, we have 2 Nile monitors that we can almost handle. They'll scratch you and slap you, but they don't try to bite. We take them outside, and you got to have gloves and a helmet on to go in there with them. They're crazy.
They're cool creatures, man. I'm fascinated by them.
They're a lot of fun. I really enjoy them. You have the Galops. So is that the same time frame to breed those as it is the Aldabras, 20 to 25 years?
Well, I don't know. Aldabras, I'm not convinced that it ain't 50 years for the males. But no, they seem to breed younger. The ones that John Heidecker and those guys, 3Js have, I think were probably 20 when they bred, that came out of Life Fellowship. And so that's pretty young, for a giant tortoise.
Mm-hmm.
That was fortunate for them because they had a pretty big investment. And it could, if they were unlucky, it could have been another 10 years.
Right.
That's not a big time frame in the life of a tortoise, of a giant tortoise,
Right.
So I'm not holding my breath. These were given to me, actually. A lady had, I don't know how long it's been, 12, 14 years. I forget now. But she had tried to donate these Aldabras to the zoo and didn't know she thought they were 2 females. The zoo didn't want them, and they knew that I kept tortoises and said, hey, Koplos might want them. I'm like, yeah, I'll take them, but I got to get the greenhouse cleaned out. At the time, it was full of Uromastyx cages that were unused. I had cleaned them out, and there was nothing there. So I had to have it all ripped out and got it all done. And I could carry them when I got them. They were maybe 100 pounds. Maybe 5-6 years down the road, I could start seeing that, wow, that one's tail looks a little big. And wow, look, he's mounting the female. So I turned out to have a pair. And the male is probably 400 pounds, and the female, I would guess, at maybe 275 or 300. And she slowed way down, not growing like the male. He just keeps growing. It barely fits through the greenhouse door.
That's amazing.
Yeah, they're neat. They're very personal. But I tell you what, Aldabras are cool, but Galapagos have a much different personality. The young Aldabras that I have, I've got some smaller ones as well, with the CCG, and they're very flighty. They hiss, they panic and run away from you. The young Galops come running to you. They see you, and they know your food, and they come. Their heads are up, and they're looking. What are you doing? You're going to feed me. Completely different animal. It's night and day. The male Aldabras seem to be much more gregarious, and my male will come, and if you scratch him, he'll stand up on all fours and put his neck out to be scratched. And if you water them, you spray them with a water hose, they'll stand up on all fours like a lot of tortoises. But the female's super shy. She's all these years. I got to approach her real slow, or she'll pull in and get upset.
We had one years ago when we made the move here to Texas.
Are you losing me? Because you just went.
No, we can see you perfectly.
My screen's looking ugly. So. But you know what? That's probably good time for me to make an exit, guys. I'm starving, and I haven't eaten anything since late morning, and so it's probably time for me to go.
Well, thank you so much for your time. You've been amazing. Awesome. I mean, yes, I want to come over and play with your turtles, though, because I think you're only about 4 hours away from us. And of course, you're welcome here anytime if you want to come hunt gray bands or hang out.
I like that idea. And yeah, you guys are welcome anytime.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yes. And yes. Well, you were excellent. The new bearded man. So thank you for coming on, everybody. We had 2 beards on tonight.
Yep.
All right, everybody.
Mine's a lot rougher than his.
It's beautiful. I like it.
Thank you.
You have to wear brighter shirts so you can see all of it.
I know. It's kind of invisible.
Take care, guys.
All right, everybody.
Good
night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.